You're with a motorcycle club. You have some affiliation with one, is that right?
I don't have any answers for questions like that.
Okay. Well, the reason I'm asking is that a few months back, a gentleman named Jeff Sudan, you know him? He threw your name out in conjunction with kind of a repossession of a car, a collection of a car. Does that sound familiar to you?
No. Jeff Sudan almost might. I'm not sure about that. It seems like Sudan rings a bell somewhere, but no, collections of a car.
Have you ever wondered what can help you get through an interrogation easily? Cunningness, deception, quick thinking? Which one of these is going to help you through? If you want the answer to this, then I would say you should tag along for the rest of this episode. Today we're going to dive into the interrogation of a man named Mark Denclaw. While most people who get interrogated by the police have no clue what's going on, Mark is a master of manipulation and knows exactly how to outsmart the detectives.
Mark?
Yep.
My name's Scott Curtis with the Clark County Sheriff's Office.
All right. What's your name?
Kevin. Harper.
Kevin?
Also with Clark County.
What's going on, fellas?
At the beginning of the interrogation, Scott Curtis confronted Mark about his involvement in the car repossession incident a few months back, which was connected to Jeff Sudan. But Mark had no answers to that. The reason, or the allegation, that brought Mark here was that one of Mark's friends, Robert Huggins, had been banned from the motorcycle club for stealing money to pay for his drug addiction. He had even broken into Mark's house, tied up his girlfriend, and stole their money. That's when Mark gathered some men from his club and took Huggins' life. Also, Nicole, Mark's girlfriend, was brought up during the interrogation. Mark revealed that they only stayed together for 3 days at a time, and he lived in a house. However, when questioned about the hospital, Mark seemed clueless. Curtis digs further and asks about Mark's relationship with Nicole. Mark grew frustrated and refused to answer any more questions until he knew what Curtis was talking. He claimed that he was being treated roughly and still had marks on his hands from the fight. Now, the police had found the body of Robert Huggins in a field. They had found out about it from a member of the club who was a drug addict and had been imprisoned for possession. Curtis asked Mark about the hospital, but Mark was confused and had no idea what he was talking about. Curtis then asked Mark how long he had been in a relationship with Nicole, but Mark refused to answer any more questions until he knew what was going on. The tension in the room escalated as Curtis explained that Nicole had taken off in a car that she may have purchased with assets that belonged to Mark. Curtis asks further, but Mark denies any knowledge of the story. He says he never had a car returned to him in his life. Curtis explained that they were trying to get to the root of what caused the whole thing. Mark asks if he was the victim, why was he being questioned? If the story was true, then he should be pressing charges, right? As the detectives continued to interrogate Mark, he remained tight-lipped about the incident where Nicole was roughed up at his house. However, he did suggest that the detectives should ask Nicole herself for the details. The detectives then revealed they were questioning Mark not only about the stolen car, but also about the robbery at his house. Mark acknowledged that he was the victim of a robbery and questioned why he was being handcuffed and interrogated. Mark refused to name names when asked who he had told about what happened, but he did mention that he had personal rules against talking behind anyone's back. He expressed his confusion as to why he was being questioned, as he had nothing to do with any of the illegal activities that the detectives had discussed. When asked about a FedEx delivery to his house, Mark hesitated to speak and said he didn't want to say anything that could get Nicole into trouble. He insisted that he would only share his side of the story if Nicole were present. As the interrogation concluded, Mark revealed that Nicole was the one who set up the robbery at his house, and that she had robbed him many times before. He also disclosed that Nicole brought back some of the stolen items and gave them to her friends to sell. Despite believing that Nicole had set up the robbery, Mark expressed that he wouldn't press charges against her and that he didn't want her to be arrested. Mark remained one step ahead of the detectives, not revealing anything that would have given them the motive to suspect him. Mark knew the risks involved if Nicole were to tell the police the same story, admitting to theft. Despite this, he couldn't comprehend why he was being questioned. He refused to divulge any more information, insisting that he was not Curtis's storyteller. He argued that Curtis had the wrong idea about the car story, and that Nicole was the one to blame. When Curtis inquired about Mark's junkie friends, he refused to give any names and said that he couldn't understand why they were even interested. Mark acted bewildered as to why he was being handcuffed and brought in for questioning, merely for Nicole purchasing a car with his money. It was the first time Mark spoke in the first person during the interrogation. As the interrogation continued, Curtis shifted his focus to Robert Huggins, also known as Bagger Bob, asking if he was a part of Nicole's junkie friends. Mark acknowledged that he knew who Bagger Bob was, but insisted that he wasn't part of Nicole's group. Curtis probed further, asking if Bagger Bob was involved in the plot with Nicole. Mark suggested that he should talk to Nicole about it. He clarified that he wasn't referring to any of their ex-club brothers, but rather Nicole's friends. When Curtis asked if Bagger Bob was one of Mark's friends, Mark became defensive, stating that he didn't want to answer any more questions about a dead man and that he needed a lawyer. Curtis explained that most people keep talking to the police for various reasons, but Mark was adamant about wanting to listen more before calling his lawyer. Curtis then asked Mark what the FedEx guy told him when he called, but Mark refused to divulge any further information and suggested that Curtis talk to Nicole about it. Curtis explained that they needed to determine the truth and falsehoods in the story by talking to different people, including Mark. They likened interrogations to playing poker, where both parties tried to outsmart each other. Curtis stated that sometimes detectives bluffed suspects by claiming that someone else involved in the crime had already confessed, hoping that the suspect would confess to a lesser charge. However, if the suspect caught on to their bluff, they would know that the detectives had nothing and end the interview. But Mark here asked Curtis if they were going to tell him everything they knew, to which Curtis responded that of course not, and that he wouldn't expect that. Mark then asked where he fit in and what his crime was in the stories they were talking about, and why he was being treated like this. Mark mentioned that he would have come in if he was asked, but he wasn't really talking to Curtis and didn't have any answers for their story. He wasn't going to straighten out their stories unless he found out what his part of it was. Mark was only interested in himself and asked about his dog's safety. Curtis confirmed that the dog was safe. Mark then asked if he was arrested for anything, and Curtis responded that he was being detained at this point, but not yet under arrest, so he didn't need a lawyer quite yet. Mark was told that it's important to have a lawyer present when being questioned by the police. Curtis indicated that certain events took place after the robbery or theft, where the FedEx guy came to the house and wanted to call the police, but Mark's acquaintance said no, and to call Mark instead. From there, a series of events unfolded involving one of Mark's club brothers, or former club brothers. Curtis urged Mark to clarify what took place as they were trying to help him out of the situation. They mentioned that Nicole is currently sitting in front of a grand jury testifying against Mark, and they have spoken to several other people as well. However, Mark argued that it was not his story and suggested that they talk to someone else. Curtis informed Mark that Nicole has lying problems, and her lies may catch up to her soon. They advised Mark to talk to them about the situation after Nicole got out of her grand jury. Mark was waiting for the police to tell them what they suspected him of committing. He was afraid of appearing guilty, so he wanted the detectives to give him a reason to request a lawyer. The detectives knew this, which is why they had not accused him of anything, and had been very vague in their questioning. When asked what he was willing to talk to them about, Mark refused to give names, so the detectives were unsure how they could talk about the people he thought they should go talk to. Mark did not want them to go talk to anyone and said he did not care what they did. When asked why he was there, Mark said it was because of things that happened to him. However, the detectives had not said anything happened. Mark believed that the detectives had their stories confused, and that they would find out. He suggested that they watch the recording to figure out what kind of bullshitter and junkie they had in front of them. Mark asked if they suspected him of committing a crime, and they said that if they did, they should let him know so he could get a lawyer. The detectives had not accused him of anything yet. Mark was confused and upset about the marks on his wrists, and felt that he was being mistreated for something he had not done. He even suggested taking a lie detector test to clear his name and not make the cops suspect the wrong people. By the end, Mark bluffs by telling the investigator to give him a lie detector test, meaning that he is confident in his answers and not afraid of being caught lying. However, he doesn't provide any further information and states he wants a lawyer present during the lie detector test. Despite the investigators' attempts to gather more information, Mark remains uncooperative and doesn't answer any more questions. Mark states that he is not willing to tell stories or share any more information about Robert. He mentions that the last time he saw Bagger, he was kicked out of their motorcycle club and he had never had any issues with him. In the end, Mark doesn't provide any further useful information to the investigator, despite their attempts to get him to talk. He literally walks out free, but that was only for a short period. Yes, there's more to this story, and if you want to watch the rest, do make sure you stay tuned. What do you think? Did Mark do it or not? Do drop your views in the comment section below. We'll meet again in the next episode. Until then, stay tuned.